Welcome to the Elevate Your Leadership podcast series with U.S. Navy Special Operations veteran, CEO, and hockey fanatic Bob Pizzini. Bob discusses leadership, success, failure, defining moments, and hard lessons learned with guests who are intentional in their approach to leadership. Leadership is a perishable skill. Use it or lose it. In this series, entrepreneurs, industry executives, academics, public figures, and other highly effective professionals share their formulas for success with you.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Elevate Your Leadership podcast with me, your host, Bob Pizzini. Hopefully, by now, you know that I love to have discussions with people who have brought great value to me and my organization. And through this podcast, they will bring great value to you and your organization. Today's guest, Dr. Scott Miller, president of Virginia Wesleyan University. Before we formally welcome Scott, I'm going to read his bio briefly. He is quite an accomplished person. In his 34th year as a college president, Dr. Scott Miller is one of the most experienced and prominent liberal arts college leaders in America. Recognized by numerous books and publications nationally for his transformative leadership style, he was identified in the book The Entrepreneurial College President as one of 17 most entrepreneurial presidents in American higher education. Leadership, entrepreneurship. That's what this podcast is about. He is regularly listed on the Power List, an annual Inside Business feature recognizing those who have the most influence in shaping the Hampton Roads, coastal Virginia region. In 2015, he became president of Virginia Wesleyan, a highly regarded national liberal arts college. He is guiding the transformation of Virginia Wesleyan University from an aspiring local college to an inspiring international university. I love thinking internationally. His 4 presidencies and 34 years of service as a CEO are rare for higher education leaders. According to the American Council on Education, American College Presidents study, just 1.1% of leaders were on their 4th presidencies in the most recent year of the survey. More than 98% of respondents had held fewer presidencies and less than 1% had served at least 34 years. You really don't look old enough to have been a college president for 34 years. According to a 2022 report by University Business, Dr. Miller is 7th in the country for length of service among all presidents and chancellors. Dr. Miller, welcome to the Elevate Your Leadership podcast.
Thank you. Delighted to be here and delighted to see your wonderful facility at iFly.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So, unfortunately, you haven't flown yet, but your kids have, your grandkids have.
Son-in-law.
Oh, son-in-law.
Yeah.
All right. That's cool.
He loved it.
Okay, good. You hear that, folks? We haven't even started yet. So, no, that's great. And you know, we'll drop iFly in as we go forward. But thank you so much for being here. You are the president of Virginia Wesleyan University. You have accomplished so much in the realm of education, in the realm of entrepreneurship, and I just think that the discussion we're about to have is really going to be valuable for people who want to lead and people who want to understand business, people who want to understand education. And I always start with kind of your origin. I only read one page of your 6-page.
Yeah, but it's a little much. Okay.
But where did you grow? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, so I grew up on the main line of Philadelphia, and the son of a public school administrator and a nurse. And you know, as a young child, my father didn't want to miss me growing up. So when he had events in evenings and on weekends, he'd often invite me to go along with him and sit in the back of the room, keep my mouth shut, and take notes.
Okay.
But I didn't realize at the time that was to keep me quiet and active so that he could be leading the discussions that were important with those groups and organizations. But you fast forward years later, and it was valuable life experience for me. And you know, I thought I was just following his instructions. I'd take notes. We'd talk about them in the car heading home.
That's cool.
And, you know, you fast forward growing up in Philadelphia, which is an extremely diverse community. That probably impacts my opinion on diversity, equity, and inclusion in higher education today. We then moved for my teenage years to the western part of the state, Edinburgh, Pennsylvania, and lived right next to the president's house at Edinburgh State College.
Oh, wow.
And so probably a combination of my father's background in public school administration, living next to, with him having an office on a college campus in my teenage years. Looking back at it now, that probably has influenced my opinion on entering higher education as a profession in some way.
Wow. Okay. All right. So it was in your DNA, I guess you could say. Did you play sports as a kid?
I did. In high school, I was a cross-country and track runner and also played basketball and baseball. And I think a lot of the habits that I have today in my leadership style really come from the cross-country and track experience.
Okay.
The discipline, the self-motivation. I'm an extremely intense competitor.
Cool.
And so I trace a lot of my leadership to some of the characteristics that were developed running and also on the fields and court as well.
Yeah. So that's really a key point there. And in your case, it was track and field. And hockey is kind of what I grew up with, but there's a discipline there it's on you. Mm-hmm. It's on you to make it happen. It's on you to show up. And I think that's a great comparison. And most leaders that I interact with that I think are awesome and I have a lot of respect for, they do have some type of athletic background. And a lot of them use sports analogies all the time. So that's pretty cool. What about high school job? Like, what was your first job?
Well,
university president?
It came out. I was a sports nerd. Okay. And, I'm a diehard baseball fan. That's probably my only hobby that I have is I'm a passionate baseball fan. First growing up for the Pittsburgh Pirates, but then as I moved away, I found that the Superstation hooked me on the Atlanta Braves.
Oh,
so
wow.
I've been a lifetime Atlanta Braves fan. But job in high school, I washed dishes at a local Holiday Inn, but I picked up a stringer position with a local newspaper, and this was from being a sports nerd. I was playing on a traveling summer baseball team, and the sports editor at the local paper said, I need somebody from the team who will call in the sports results after each game. And I did better than that. I didn't call them in. I wrote them up and dropped them off. And the guy said to me, you're pretty good at this. Can I get you to be a stringer throughout the year covering some of our high school events? So as a 16 and 17-year-old, I was covering for the local newspaper different athletic events. And when I headed off to college, I originally thought I was going to be a journalist.
Yeah.
And I went to West Virginia Wesleyan College on a running scholarship, ended up tearing up my knee, and the school said, well, rather than taking away the small scholarship that you have for athletics, what we're going to do is assign you to the sports information office, and in exchange for what you were receiving to be a cross-country and track runner, we'll have you work with the SID. And
what's SID?
Sports Information Director.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Uh-huh.
And, one thing led to another. I couldn't run anymore. I wanted to be a journalist. I was calling in all these results, and they were getting in the newspaper. And when the SID resigned on short notice, they asked me to be the interim.
Wow.
When they finally filled the position, the local newspaper said, why don't you come and work for us on weekends and on evenings? And so that led to, sure, I liked sports. I wanted to cover sports, and I thought that's where my career was going to be. And
sports journalism.
Yeah, if you talk to people who knew me in the 1970s, what would Scott Miller be as a career? They would have guessed a Division I athletic director or a journalist for a major newspaper.
Okay, all right.
And sort of drifted off course from that.
Yeah, a little bit. But so real quick before I forget to ask, do you have any D1? I think you have a female softball team.
Yeah, so we're Division III in sports, which is non-scholarship. It's based on academics, not on athletic ability.
Gotcha.
But we've won 3 national championships at the NCAA Division III level.
Awesome.
The big difference between 1, 2, and 3 is depth.
Yeah.
And Division III is more geared toward the comprehensive student athlete.
Yeah.
They come for academics first and athletics next versus what you're seeing at the Division I level.
Okay. That's a great explanation. Thanks for clarifying that. Just all these little nuggets of gold. I love having these discussions. Okay, so the young, intrepid, potential sports journalist is working for the newspaper and working for the university, and then what follows?
So I graduated, and I was happy working for 3 daily newspapers in central West Virginia. I wrote a column that was called Miller Time, which was a humorous look at sports in West Virginia.
Okay.
And what I didn't realize is that my college advisor thought that I was going to waste my life staying in West Virginia writing for a newspaper or a news system for a low salary. And he nominated me for a position in Ohio, and out of the blue, a college in Ohio called me and invited me to come for an interview as a director of public information and a speechwriter for the president of the institution.
Wow.
And I was 22 years old at the time, thought it was a great opportunity. We meshed immediately when I went for a visit. Never knew the story about my advisor nominating me for the position. And, the irony of it, that one of the people who had an active role in hiring me for the job is now my executive in residence at Virginia Wesleyan, a retired college president. But that was my shift into higher education. And I was a speechwriter for the president.
Okay. This is University of Ohio?
No, this is a school called Rio Grande College.
Okay.
And it's spelled like Rio Grande, but they have this non-traditional pronunciation, which is another long conversation for another day.
Okay.
But the president was this old gravelly cuss who couldn't write, and he needed a good writer to write his speeches and do his presentations. And he gave me that opportunity at 22. And when the chief development officer left a year later, he said to me, there are people who make news and there are people who write news. And he said, you've been writing it, but your personality is really making news. Why don't you do this position for me on an interim basis while I sort it out? And it'll be a great experience that you'll thank me for 30 years from now. And so I was 23 years old at the time, and I was heading the advancement operation as a whole. That's the fundraising for the institution. But I said to him, the guy before me was a vice president, and he chuckled and he said, nobody would have a 23-year-old vice president do the job, and you'll repeat it. You'll thank me in 30 years.
Yeah.
Well, 2 years later, the VP who left had gone to a school in Tennessee as the executive vice president, and he called me and he said, hey, I've always been impressed by your work habits. I've watched what you've done since I left Ohio. We'd like to hire you as vice president for development. So I was 25 years old when I assumed the vice president for development position at Lincoln Memorial University in Tennessee.
Wow.
3 years later, became their executive vice president, and 3 years after that, became the president of the institution.
Wow. So one of the things I'm gathering, and we're just getting started really, is you have moved a lot.
True, but untrue. You look at it, I've been president of 4 different colleges, but it's been over 34 years. I'm not...
Okay, gotcha.
My first presidency at Lincoln Memorial University was a little bit under 7 years, but I had been at the school 6 prior years as the vice president. I was president at Wesley College in Dover, Delaware for 11 years, Bethany College on the Pennsylvania-West Virginia line for 8 years, and I'm just started year 10 here. So It's not as if I jump every 3 or 4 years. I have this philosophy on a shelf time for a college president.
Okay.
And
all right.
it's a part of my leadership style.
Yeah.
I'm a transformational leader.
Yeah. Love that.
Places have hired me to make change.
Love that. Transformational leadership. Love that. And Scott just described really what that is really well. That's pretty cool. Just, having served 26 years in U.S. Navy Special Operations, we move a lot. But your point is well taken. You're at one place for a pretty good amount of time.
Yeah, and when you're a change agent, you do ruffle some feathers early on.
That's right.
People are happy with the status quo. They want to see change as long as it's not them.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So,
not in my backyard, etc.
Right.
Yeah. Same thing when we were trying to build this place. We really had some opposition. People didn't want another bungee jump. They didn't want another Ferris wheel. They didn't understand what...
Far from that.
Yeah, for sure.
Boy, what an impressive facility you have.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we're same thing, 10 years. We're, we are in our 10th operating year, so we'll have our 10th birthday in April of next year. So that's pretty cool. So you've moved around a lot. You're gaining this experience. You're developing your kind of style, your brand of leadership. which leads me to the quintessential question of the Elevate Your Leadership podcast, which is, how do you define the word leadership?
Yeah, I really think it's guiding and impacting outcomes with groups or organizations. And, to take that the step further, I am a transformational leader. So I move organizations. If you're looking for status quo, that's not me.
Mm-hmm.
I have this phrase that I've used for years. If an institution is standing still, it's really going backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And my philosophy of leadership has always been to take what's broken and fix it, and to take an organization to the next level. And I'd like to think that my 4 presidencies, that the 3 that I've left before me, that every institution is in better shape when I leave than when I got there.
For sure.
And, we set out with some pretty specific objectives, and it's my job as the leader of the organization to move the group, to move the institution, and to move it to the next level. And that's been sort of my niche as a leader in higher education. I was rather non-traditional in my first presidency. I was 31 years old at the time, and I had come out of the fundraising arm, had raised a lot of money at a school that had never raised money, had looked at their business model and redefined a business model that was different than the way they had done it before. And the success characteristics of that institution could be judged by the growth in resources, the growth in enrollment,
Sure.
the growth in fundraising,
Sure.
and
Absolutely.
the growth in the market. And that's really what my leadership has been about in higher education. Back when I got started at age 31, most college presidents were not coming out of the advancement area, and none of them were 31 years old.
For sure.
Most college presidents in 1990 and 1991 were stuffy academics who read and wrote books and made presentations and came from the academic side of the house.
Spoke in a very monotone voice.
You
and put
got it.
people to sleep.
You got it. And didn't leave campus much.
Yeah.
And, my job is being out there.
That
and
another key aspect of leadership.
Pressing the business model.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Same thing with me. My job is more relative outside of this building than it is inside this building, or at least equally. So I get that. And that's one of the reasons we know each other as well as we do is
the organizations we've been in Hampton Roads.
Yeah, we see each other at a lot of different things, to include speaking to our city council when we feel it's necessary.
You got it.
So that's a lot of fun stuff. So 10 years with Virginia Wesleyan, it's funny because early in my career, when I wasn't making really good decisions, I lived in Campus East, which is kind of right across the street there. So that's kind of an urban area. I'm not sure the best way to describe that, but Virginia Wesleyan, I mean, the location of the university is unique in that it touches really 3 major roadways, if you will, but then it touches kind of this real urban area of Virginia Beach as well.
Right.
Do you have anything to say about?
So we're the epicenter of Hampton Roads.
Okay.
And, I think the founders of this institution in 1961 were geniuses, and they didn't know it at the time. So when they were selecting a location, they picked this 300 acres that was essentially a corn and soybean farm, and there was nothing around it. And what's happened since 1961, and this led to my arrival in 2015. In 2015, I was recruited here in what was a closed search by an executive search consultant who said, I've got this institution, your name has come up, you have a lot of the characteristics they're looking for, would you be interested in talking with them? And when I talked to them, they said, we've got a relatively young institution by higher ed standards. We are located in the middle of a community called Hampton Roads. We're very traditional, and we're a well-kept secret, and we don't want to be any of those. And we're looking for a leader who's experienced, who will come in and not have to take a year to listen and learn, will come in with a plan right away for action. And the plan that we want for action is, we don't want to be viewed as a traditional residential liberal arts college anymore. We want to be comprehensive in approach, and we want to add all the characteristics of a comprehensive institution. And we don't want people to say, oh, you're a well-kept secret. We don't want to be a well-kept secret. We want to think outside the box, even blow the box up and throw it away.
I love it.
And that's what we're looking for in a leader. And that's what I'd like to think that we've done during my 9+ years as president of Virginia Wesleyan. We've blown up the box. We've looked at things in new ways. Don't know if you're familiar with the book Blue Ocean Strategy.
Absolutely.
It came out of Harvard in 2003, 2004.
Absolutely. I'm going to quote something from that here in just a minute. It came to me earlier in our discussion.
So I can't quote the whole book, but I love the philosophy that they talk about sharks and sharks fighting and causing blood in the water and bloody fights. Or you can go blue ocean strategy, which is finding things that are consistent with your mission, but moving in new waters that are clear and clean. That's a paraphrase of this book. So, we're in a market that has 14 colleges and universities competing in the same market for students. If we were to go head-to-head with the state schools, we'd devote a lot of resources to it. And what would happen is that we would get ugly like sharks fighting with each other over the same students and the same programs in the same markets. Or you can create blue ocean strategy, and that blue ocean strategy is to find new things that others can't replicate, that are using new markets and new innovations in order to recruit the student body that you want and the resources that are necessary to run the organization. So, what is different about us? We are the only school that's categorized by the Carnegie Foundation as a national liberal arts college that's in our immediate market. The closest school to that is Richmond.
Okay.
So in our market, ODU is a research institution. They want to see us be an extremely strong arts and sciences institution because we'll produce wonderful graduate students, master's and doctoral students for them. We have a global engagement component. So we acquired in 2019 a collaborative campus in Tokyo, Japan. Why a collaborative campus in Tokyo, Japan? Well, we have the Port of Virginia here. They have the Port of Tokyo there.
Okay.
We can have students intern at the Port of Virginia and the Port of Tokyo. We can develop an interactive learning experience. Every student can have a global experience by going to our collaborative campus in Tokyo. And it also creates a presence for us from a student recruitment standpoint because the campus in Tokyo recruits in 20 Asian countries. It's a 2-year school. And so the final 2 years, they come to the United States and they get a 4-year education with an American brand to it. It's different from what any other school in this market is doing.
Sure.
You have seen the recent announcement, the Virginia Museum of Contemporary Art is coming to our campus. 3 local donors said, you're a national liberal arts college. Mocha's building is tired and dated. They need a new facility. What if we put up the money to build a facility on your campus that is consistent with your mission and purpose, and at the same time will raise your niche and be more attractive to students that are interested in studying in the arts? So not just the performing arts now, but contemporary art. And we'll be groundbreaking on that. But that's different than other institutions in the area. And that's what we try to do. And that's my focus is on developing a business model and then generating the resources that are necessary to drive that model. And I like to say we use blue ocean strategy to fulfill that model. We're growing at a time that the enrollment cliff is hitting in the United States. And, we are still, because we were ahead of schedule on our planning, able to respond to the enrollment cliff in a more comprehensive way because we were ahead of the planning. We didn't wait for it. We initiated plans before it occurred.
Yeah. Kind of that forward thinking, forward leaning. Absolutely. Sun Tzu, I've got a little cliff notes of Sun Tzu right there. He says in war, prepare for peace, and in peace, prepare for war. So what you did was prepare for this downward trend in enrollment well in advance, and not suffer the pains of it. I love that. So Blue Ocean Strategy, you've given me so much here. So that I'm trying to get a proper ice arena built in Virginia Beach with 2 or more sheets of ice, so we can really do what the rest of the nation is doing in terms of community center, in terms of sports tourism, in terms of relationship with the NHL, summer training camps, etc. So of those 300 acres, if you really want to go blue ocean, let's talk about perhaps the first collegiate hockey team in the state of Virginia.
I think it's a wonderful idea here in Virginia Beach, and I think with the sports complex and the convention center, I think that would be a wonderful idea. And that sort of ties into one of our strategies. When I came here, I had a brand analysis done, and we although 270 of our 300 acres are located in Virginia Beach, we used a Norfolk mailing address. And when I did a brand analysis, and they looked at 18 to 22-year-olds in 5 different cities up and down the East Coast, and asked them the question, if there are 7 cities in Virginia, which one would you want to go to school in, without naming a school, the students in the 7 markets said Virginia Beach. And when I came to the board and I said, this may sound small to you, but we'd like to use our Virginia Beach address in our marketing, and we'd like to celebrate water and the word beach.
For sure. Absolutely.
And found that 92% students in the study group had said beach was important to them.
Brilliant.
Well, we do the recruiting up the East Coast. So you're talking about,
they grew up on the water.
Kids in Boston, when they're having a horrible winter, they'd love to come to Virginia Beach. And the same's true for New York and Philadelphia and Washington and Baltimore.
And half of them were probably here as kids on some form of vacation.
So, why do we have a rate that's 16% higher than the other institutions in the area in keeping our graduates after graduation? Because a lot of those kids from those cold winter cities come here for an education, like Virginia Beach as a place to live, and stay here after graduation. It's a part of our corporate strategy.
That's huge for the region, too. As we know, this Hampton Roads region really faces, kind of southeastern Virginia, really faces challenges in keeping talent here. And we have so much going on in terms of economic growth. The Port of Virginia is getting larger. The wind farm, offshore wind, Chesapeake just announced that huge cable factory. Right. So the need for young, talented, educated people and the trades, everything. We really have a need here. I want to go back to Blue Ocean Strategy real quick. One of the things they discussed in that book was pioneers, migrators, and settlers. And I believe it was in terms of a business. You can have a business that's pioneering, migrating, or settling. And I just, the way my brain adapted to that was within an organization, you have pioneers, migrators, and settlers. And really, I think you need all 3, within your organization. But as a leader, to identify, to know that, hey, that person is a settler. They want to show up at 9, they want to go home at 5, and they don't want disruption during their day. That's okay. Organizations have a need for that level of stability. And then as a leader, you can interact with those type of people, or the migrator, or the people who are on the move. You want to encourage them and keep them on the move. So
I assemble my leadership team of people that are superior to me in certain areas, but who are all, I want to make sure that they're all change-oriented and supportive of that philosophy. Yeah, there are people in the organization who might have jobs that are typical 8:30 to 4:30 jobs, but that's not typical. Higher education is a business these days.
It's certainly a private university.
So I'm the unusual president of Virginia Beach Vision, which is 130 business leaders in Virginia Beach. That is a board of 130 CEOs and COOs from businesses in Virginia Beach. And they say to me, how is it that the leader of a college or a university is the elected president of a group of business leaders in Virginia Beach? And, I share it with them this way. First of all, a college is a business.
Sure. Especially a private college.
Universities don't like to say that. Faculty don't like to say that. But yes, we are a business. We have metrics that we expect to reach. But at the same time, in these times where there's political volatility, where there's volatility in businesses, who better to lead an organization that's 130 business leaders than somebody who's used to dealing with 8 different constituency groups, keeping faculty happy on one hand, students happy on another, and boards of trustees, than to lead an organization that's designed to help forecast the the businesses in the region for years to come and help facilitate an agenda that supports that. So, that's a little bit of that. But back to my leadership team, when I was 31 years old and college president, the board came to me as a vice president and said, we'd like to try you on as a president. And I with confidence said, I accept that challenge. I want to do it. Never said I'll give it a try. I said, I want to do it.
Right.
And what I found on day one was I was expected to have an answer to everything, and there were a lot of things I didn't know. And so
hallmark for good leadership.
For 6 months, I felt like the burden was on me to do everything. And then a wise retired president said to me, no, your job is to facilitate moving an agenda. And there was a lot of sense in that, and I've carried that theory for 34 years. So I hire superior individuals.
That's right.
I was 31 years old. I had a 67-year-old academic vice president who probably, I can only imagine what he thought of reporting to somebody who was 31 years old. I had people who were superior in their areas of specialty, and I learned that it was my job. I was ultimately judged not by any one thing, but by how the overall organization produced. And if those people who were different from me, superior to me in their skills in their particular areas, if I could get them to come together, and the organization would be far more productive as a whole in moving the overall agenda. And I've sort of kept that theory through the 34 years as a college president.
Yeah, no, I love that. Absolutely. We had an incident here. We had an equipment failure a couple weeks ago, and I was notified of it. I came on scene. I saw what my team was doing and how they were responding, and I immediately said to myself, just stay out of their way. They got it. They're doing great. If I insert myself, they're going to follow my lead, and they don't need me to lead right now. They need me to, support and make sure they have everything they need. But sometimes leaders need to know when they need to be able to recognize when you just need to let your team do what they're great at.
I think of our chief information officer. He talks a language I don't talk.
Right.
People assume because I've been so active on social media for so many years that I'm a techie. I may have been ahead of the curve among college presidents in technology years ago, but technology changes every day.
Yeah.
And I recall one day in a meeting, somebody saying, do you feel like the CIO is talking down to you when he gives you those explanations? And I said, I need that because he has a particular expertise that I don't have.
Right.
And his task, technology, is the future of the institution.
Yeah.
And we need to be responsive to it. And, I can't stay current in it. I rely on him to give me the answers.
Yeah.
And I think that's what good leadership's all about.
For sure. I smile as you say that. Your chief information officer, who is an IT person, of sorts, and Dexter, my IT guy, who's going to edit this podcast for us, he helps me set up and do it. But I got to really be careful about what I ask him because he will just kill me with a lot of technical data it's
well, trying to put it in layman's terms is hard.
Yeah.
And every day it's something different.
Yeah, exactly. On that front, I wanted to ask you about social media and, our governor here in Virginia, Governor Youngkin, I believe yesterday, made it so kids K through 12 cannot have their telephone in the classroom, which I fully support. I think that's a great idea. But kids, there's so much reporting now that this screen time and, all these different, this kind of velocity that happens when they look at their phone, and it's really destructive. And I would agree with that, but I just wonder what your thoughts are on that.
So I'll divide it into two categories here. And if I get so into the one and leave it, remind me. I'll first hit the social media side and why I'm so active on it. And then I'll talk about using iPhones and cell phones and having them in the classroom. So back when I became president of Bethany College, Bethany's on the West Virginia-Pennsylvania line.
Okay. What year was it?
Near Pittsburgh, 2007.
Okay.
The campus of Bethany College is absolutely beautiful. It's out of Harry Potter. It's 1840s. Beautiful campus, but it's on a mountaintop in a very isolated location. and there's one road in and out of town, 39 miles to Pittsburgh, but it's a painful drive because it's an isolated institution. I needed to have a strategy on how I was going to communicate with people on campus and off campus in a cost-efficient way. And my branding company, BD&E out of Pittsburgh, Brand Drives Everything, is what BD&E stands for, developed an initial social media strategy for me to hit 8 different platforms. And the idea was that whenever I wanted, I could post something to any one of those 8 platforms, and I could communicate with people in California or in Pittsburgh
or Tokyo.
And the idea was that the 8 platforms that were given to me would provide me with a venue that would hit every age group from teenagers to retirees. In 2007, some of the social media was underdeveloped, and so by using Hootsuite, I could post to any of the 8 when I wanted to do it. An old friend, he's now in his 44th year as president, Gordon Gee, he's president at West Virginia University, was at Ohio State at the time, and we compared our playbooks in social media strategy and developed it pretty well, and it was getting a very good review. And in fact, there was a book that was called Follow the Leader, and it focused on 17 higher education leaders and how they use social media to promote their business model across different platforms. And so when I left there in 2015 to come here, there was a fascination among board members with my social media platforms, and we continued it here. And so, we have an active strategy on how many posts per week and what venues. I learned, I guess you call it the hard way. I have 32,000 followers on LinkedIn.
Wow.
You max out at 30,000, but they can follow you but not interact with you after 30,000's the max.
That's why Schwarzenegger gets back to me.
So yeah, it's fascinating, but I've used it to push our name and me as the face of the institution out to different markets, and it has worked rather effectively. And I get teased by some people locally for the frequency that we have information, but it's breaking down those barriers. When the board said we don't want to be a well-kept secret, I want it in every house that I can get it into, and I use social media for that.
On an international level too. In your intro, we talked about how you're transforming again that best-kept secret to an international brand.
So to the other side of the question, and this is one of the 2 that you were asking, social media and technology in the classroom. The classroom in higher education has actually been experimenting with the classroom of the future over the last few years. And I was in a fascinating presentation at the Apple headquarters not terribly long ago on how you implement technology into the classroom in a way that also controls access. You don't want students sitting in a higher educational class playing on Facebook or social media, checking emails or doing that type of thing. So the Apple and Microsoft, I've seen presentations by both, have the capability now of doing a classroom of the future where when you walk into the room, it registers whether you're present or not using your iPhone, but then essentially there's a scrambler while you're in that room that doesn't allow outside reception of signal. And you say, how does that provide a safe environment? Well, it gives the professor and a control center the ability to manage for safety purposes. I found real fascination in it because it will do many things. If you have a classroom that's equipped for that, a professor can be in the front of the room lecturing the students. A professor can flip the classroom and use technology with the students, the technology that he or she wants. But at the same time, some of the basics. As soon as a student walks through the door, the technology in that room records that the student is present. And if the student leaves the class early, it checks them back out as leaving early. Or if the professor has an iPad at the front of the room, it shows where each student in the room is located, and the professor, if he thinks that Bob's head's been down and he's doing something else, can call on Bob in the back of the room by looking at his iPad and knowing what the names are that are associated with the dots that register with the student ID that came into the room. So those things are coming. And
Bob had nuns in his upbringing who seemed to be able to do that anyway.
They would throw an eraser at you, or
exactly
with something like that. But those things are sooner than you think.
Okay.
And while
is that coming to Virginia Wesleyan?
We're having discussions on it right now. We're wanting to see the glitches worked out.
Okay.
But for those who think that the governor's being controversial by doing that, there are ways of handling it without necessarily issuing an edict. And that new technology can provide that if implemented in the right way.
Okay.
And it's not so far off.
Okay, good. Yeah, like you said, it changes literally every single day. So these kids looking at these screens, not necessarily in the classroom, but there seems to be a trend, and I don't have statistics handy, but the less kids are playing sports. It's just kids aren't moving as much,
right.
And there's this destruction, or there's this this negative effect on the growth of the brain and the functionality of the brain. Do you have any any observations?
Yeah,
there?
I have seen that. So 2019, when the pandemic was starting to gain steam, 2020, the governor did the stay-at-home order. We had, I had a donor come to me and say, okay, we're doing classes in Zoom or hybrid format. What can we do since there's a stay-at-home order to engage with our students? And, I asked my staff, and they said, well, we don't have an esports program. Esports is gaining steam. And so I said to the donor, what if you developed an esports arena for me? And so we have an esports arena adjacent to Town Bank Arena in our Jane P. Batten Student Center. And, I figured when the world opened back up, it would be put into full use. But what I saw is during the pandemic, more students started relying on technology for entertainment and socialization. And when the world did open back up, they rushed to our esports arena, so much so that we had to build a second one.
Wow.
But, my observation from it is that usually on a college campus, Thursday night and Saturday night, any college campus anywhere, those are usually the party nights.
Okay. All right.
And living on campus, I can walk around anywhere and, ethnographically see what trends are in socialization. After the pandemic, when I walked the residence halls on a Thursday or a Saturday night, I did see just what you're talking about. The music was still loud. Doors were sometimes open, but students were on computers, and they weren't writing papers. They were doing esports. And I see, the nice thing from my perspective is that 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, when that's usually when you have parties on campuses, you would see students competing in esports competitions and playing games of that variety.
Yeah.
There's a good to that, but there's also a sadness about it. And coming out of the pandemic, mental health on college campuses, the concern out of that has increased quite a bit. All colleges and universities are having to expand mental health services because people are coming out of the pandemic in different ways. And here we are 4 years later, and we're still talking about some of the impacts.
Yeah.
So the physical sports are growing. Unusual sports are growing. We joined the ECAC for our overall athletic program, the East Coast Athletic Conference, which is 104 schools in our division up and down the East Coast. But the real benefit of ECAC membership is it gives a conference for our esports program. We compete against 85 schools in esports up and down the East Coast.
Wow.
And from a budgetary standpoint, they do very little traveling. Because they can do it from campus, so it's efficient.
That's interesting. Esports on college campus. So you heard it here first.
It's booming.
Yeah, that is really cool. Okay, we are going to take our first commercial break. In the opening, when I was reading Dr. Miller's bio, we talked about his entrepreneurship and the fact that he's a CEO. And we are going to take an entrepreneurial timeout for capitalism. Back in a minute. I want to take a minute to tell you about my book titled Elevate Your Leadership, How to Develop, Maintain, and Advance Lifelong Leadership. This book is based on my 26 years in U.S. Navy Special Operations and now 13 years in the private sector. Leadership is a perishable skill and a personal brand. In part 1, I guide you through building and applying your personal brand of leadership. Leadership also requires physical energy and mental clarity. In part 2, I go over the 6 key components of health and wellness and how you can apply these components every single day to become a great leader. This book is also breathable. What does that mean? It's 170 pages, 12-point font, with charts and graphs and pictures to break up the monotony of reading page after page. Finally, this book is available on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and of course, RobertPizzini.com. Folks, I want to take a minute and talk about Breeden Construction. Breeden Construction built iFly Virginia Beach 10 years ago, and our building is solid. Why? Building a standard. Our standard is excellence. Visionary thinking, innovative design, dynamic solutions, and transformative growth. While others may see lofty ideals, we see the very foundation needed to construct a better future. This isn't just a promise we make to you, it's the standard we uphold. This is Breeden Construction. Learn more at breedenconstruction.com. Headquartered in Virginia with offices throughout Virginia and North Carolina, you can contact Breeden Construction directly at area code 804-364-4600. Breeden Construction, a national general contractor. All right, folks, we are back on the Elevate Your Leadership podcast with Dr. Scott Miller, president of Virginia Wesleyan University. Before we pick it up with Scott, I just want to remind you that if you like what you're seeing, what you're hearing, depending whether or not you're watching this on YouTube or you're listening to it on one of the audio platforms, Spotify, Apple, etc. I have many, many more episodes, and again, I only have discussions with people who bring value to me and my organization. So I would ask you to comment, and if you have any requests for future guests, please send me that information. I also want to let you know about some guests I have coming up in the not-too-distant future. Former Governor of Virginia, Bob McDonnell, will be on the podcast next week. We will have sitting U.S. Congresswoman from the 2nd District in Virginia, Jen Kiggins, on. Hopefully the week after that. We're working through that schedule. And then also Virginia U.S. senatorial candidate Hung Kao, who's a personal friend, and he's been on this podcast twice already. So we have some really exciting things coming up. So stay tuned, comment, like, share. Really the best thing you can do is share episodes with everybody in your inner circle. All right, back to Dr. Miller. One of the things that we were talking about before I hit record was some of these riots and this anti-Semitism that seems to be sweeping the country, and how different universities, especially some of these Ivy League and higher level universities, really fumbled, I would say. And I remember Attorney General Miyares, the Virginia Attorney General, giving a press conference and saying that, I think he was talking about the University of Virginia in particular. He said, in our state, we will abide by and enforce the law. So so they did have a little dust up there, but the authorities put it down quickly. Anyway, did you have any of that type of negative experience at Virginia Wesleyan?
We really didn't. And, my reaction to the 3 who just totally flopped the interviews with Congress is that if you really want to know what's going on college campuses in those areas, those aren't the 3 you want to talk to. At the Ivy League institutions hire scholars to be the ceremonious heads of their organizations. What goes on the campus in general occurs several tiers below. If you really want to know what's happening on a college campus, you talk to people like Michael Crow at Arizona State, who I think is the most effective college leader in the country. Paul LeBlanc, who retired last week as the president of Southern New Hampshire University. You talk to people like that who are in the trenches and really can represent mainstream higher education. It's a shame that higher education as a whole took a beating because of the testimony of a few. We actually have issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion embedded in everything that we do at Virginia Wesleyan. So, we didn't need to set up an office because it's a part of our culture. 43% of our students are underrepresented populations. 41% are Pell eligible. 30% are the first in their family to go to college. 27% are African American. 11% are Hispanic. So we have an extremely diverse community. And that led several years ago to us establishing something that was originally called the Center for the Study of Religious Freedom. And Bob Nussbaum and Joan Brock, two local leaders, were the ones that initiated this program, and it's matured beautifully over the 30 years that it's been in existence.
Wow, 30 years.
But the Nussbaum Center is led by a Yale PhD who's been on our faculty for 30 years. He's a religion professor. And before these things got out of hand, he led respectful conversations on really critical topics. And he brought together controversial presenters from both sides. And whether it's race or religion or whatever, he brings them together. He has respectful conversations. And the winners on this are our students. They hear people who are polar opposites on issues have a discussion. And if they start to get out of hand, Craig has this masterful way of leading a discussion that says, let's do this in a very respectful way. We're here to learn. We're not here to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And so these issues, he's done a masterful job of leading these discussions. Often the Nussbaum Center makes these programs open to the community as a whole. But as a result,
brilliant.
Our students had good understanding of issues. And whether it was this or he did the same thing right after George Floyd to have conversations of those varieties as well. So it didn't hit us the way it hit some campuses as a result of having somebody who I think is the best in the business at leading those discussions.
Yeah, wow. Okay, that's again, that's probably forward-leaning. It's preparing for the future before the future gets here.
Because people learn when they're in classrooms, when they're in residence halls. The better learning occurs when they're around people that are different from themselves.
Totally agree.
And if you can bring people together for a discussion that are different, everybody learns and benefits. And that's what we're in the thought business.
Yeah, right. So. Exactly. That's, like Elevate Your Leadership, my one-day event here. It's really a facilitated discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I put out the concept, the principle. I'll share my experience with it, positive or negative, and then I call it rotation for reflection. I only do groups of 12 thereabouts because that way everybody has time to really share their experiences. But that's where the real value comes from, because we could have a totally different perspective on something that seems so binary, so straightforward. But where we grew up, when we grew up, what languages we speak, what life was like for us early in our life, it affects how we view whatever that.
And that's my life as well. I say this humbly, but I've received a couple of awards this year from organizations that you say, why would an old white man get awards for diversity-related issues?
Yeah.
I grew up in really diverse Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia has people of all different national origins and religions. And after growing up there and then going for my teenage years to the northwestern part of the state, that was entirely the opposite. What was missing was those interactions with people that were different from me. And I've, throughout my career, had a special appreciation for people from underserved populations, because my early years were very much with those people in classrooms and on playgrounds.
Yeah, that's interesting. In 26 years in the military, I've served with, Asian Pacific Islanders in Chamorro, which are Guam or, so Guamanian, but really they call them Chamorro. Filipino, the kid who grew up in the rodeo scene from Montana, a lot of hockey players, obviously. And, I'll never forget in Iraq, she was probably 21, this young black administrative clerk. And, as she's processing my administrative paperwork right there at Balad Air Base, she has her weapon right next to her. She's fully prepared to use it. And if we're going to go to battle together, we're going to go to battle together. But in the military, this DE&I, and I wrote about this in my book, we had core values. In the Navy, it's honor, courage, and commitment. And if we really reflect on those core values, that was DEI in the military before the military formally adapted DEI programming, which I personally think is not suitable for the U.S. military. But I think core values drive the unity that we look for, and that was my experience. I'm speaking from jumping out of airplanes to diving the depths of the world's oceans to fighting a war in Iraq, and you need that person to your left or to your right to know what they're doing, and you need to be there for them. They're there for you, and you need to be there for them. And I think the sooner we can recognize that,
we mirror the community that we're in. I mean, this Hampton Roads is extremely diverse. When you put the 1.7 million people together and look at the demographics of it, it's a diverse community.
Second most diverse in the U.S., as a matter of fact. Second most integrated in the U.S.
So, when George Floyd happened, a lot of people started DEI programs and initiated offices. We didn't have to, because DEI is a part of our fabric.
Yeah.
And if we're going to be in Hampton Roads, which is an extremely diverse community, religiously, racially, gender-related items and the like, then, people aren't going to come to your school if you don't respect people who are different. That's a part of our culture. So, we didn't need to start an office because it's a part of all we do.
Yeah. I think deep down inside, it's a part of everybody and who we are, and it's just how we choose to recognize it, harness it, and execute it. And I just gave you my example. I grew up with, in the military with people from all these different backgrounds, and if you got somebody who's bilingual or multilingual, I mean, that's a talent you want to put to play. If you got somebody who's good at carpentry, by God, let's get them building something. So, anyway. Okay, this is really a fascinating discussion. I love, your level of depth of knowledge with all things regarding your university, which you would expect from a college president. There's a couple of just off-the-wall questions. I think it's Ohio State University. Their chancellor is Ted Carter, former. I forget the title. He was in charge of Annapolis.
Okay,
but Slapshot Carter. So, hockey player.
Okay.
And getting back to the anti-Semitism and the riots on campus, he also shut it down, and he did it I pretty much in the fashion that you just described. He said if we're going to have any unrest, it's going to be in the form of discussion. And I saw a media piece how initially he was kind of the media viewed his response negatively, but when you go a layer or two deeper, the students, the parents of the students, everybody else, they really appreciated the way he handled that situation. So, but I played hockey against him, Slapshot Carter.
They've been through a lot of change. They've turned over a couple chancellors in a very short period of time.
Right.
So our president, I think, is what Ohio State calls.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Is there a difference between chancellor?
Usually, a chancellor oversees a system, and a president oversees a campus.
So okay.
Gordon Gee, who I mentioned earlier on social media, was the president there 2 different times, and I knew him and Ohio State quite well. So
okay.
I don't know the current leader.
Yeah. Okay. But he's pretty legendary naval aviator and
hockey player.
And hockey player. And when he was the commanding officer of the, I believe it was the USS Enterprise, we played a charity hockey game, all the Navy Special Operations guys against this carrier crew, and they call him Slapshot Carter for a reason.
Okay.
The guy's a great defenseman, great hockey player, but him and I took the ceremonial puck drop at center ice, and it was a highlight of my life. Here I am with somebody who's at that time he was, I think he was a captain. He was not an admiral at that time, but he was a rising star, and I was just honored to be in his presence.
Well, there are two different times that the presidents of most of the institutions are together each year, and I'll keep that in my pocket for when I have an opportunity.
Ah, cool.
To visit with it.
Okay, yeah, let me know, and I'll send you a copy of the photos.
Good deal. Good deal.
That'll be a lot of fun. One of the other things I wanted to get to is I mentioned that Congresswoman Jen Kiggins is going to be on the podcast here in a week or two. And you now have an ROTC, a Navy ROTC program at Virginia Wesleyan. Now, obviously, I'm heavily biased because I was in the Navy for 26 years. But can you just tell us about that program?
Yeah, so Jen's been a good friend to us. And, we are an apolitical organization where we work with those who represent our institutions. We're, nonpartisan in those views. But Jen came to see me one day, and I might add, first of all, she just had her congressional art competition in the Good Center at Virginia Wesleyan, and she had her Service Academy information session on our campus as well. So we're proud that we are fulfilling a need for her in her district. But she came to see me one day, and she walked into the lobby of Godwin Hall and up the steps to my office, and she said, so I see you have Army ROTC. Why don't you have Navy ROTC? And I said, so I have Army ROTC, but I don't have Navy ROTC. And she said, exactly. And I said, maybe you can help me answer that question. I said, we would like to have it, but have found resistance to it. Within 3 hours, we had a telephone call that she left my office that day, made a call, and the Navy was suddenly interested in having Navy ROTC at Virginia Wesleyan. And that was just this past spring. And we have rolled it out in an announcement, and the response to it has been extremely strong, especially in a market where you have the largest naval station in the country.
Absolutely.
The children of those enlisted are interested in something like this. Mm-hmm. And so it's been a hot interest item, and we thank Jen for really initiating that and making it happen for us.
That is cool. So let's just talk about the benefits or kind of the the mechanics of the program. Does ROTC offsets the cost of university? Is that correct?
Yeah, there's actually a pretty generous scholarship program, and it depends which component. There are several different components, but if you're all in, you can get a pretty generous financial reward for saying from the start you want to be in Navy ROTC.
Okay, full ride or?
There's some matching money from the institution in scholarship funds.
Okay.
It can be, depending on the scenario.
Okay. And do you think that's going to help your recruitment numbers overall?
Yeah. So we have, and it's, a collaborative program. There are a couple other institutions in our immediate market that we will be a part of sort of a consortial approach. And so each of the institutions will have a role in it. But the winner is the students because they'll find an affordable way to pursue an education. The winner in it also is our Navy nationwide.
Absolutely.
And, you and I are here talking about leadership. What better way to develop leaders than through the armed forces?
For sure.
Great leadership development programs. So we're excited about it.
Good. Well, I sure am glad to hear it. And, I served with so many people who benefited from the ROTC program and had wonderful military careers, and people who weren't really sure what ROTC was when they went to college. Some were like, "That's what I want to do," and some were like, "What is that? What does that even stand for?" And they wound up being great military officers, great military enlisted folks, etc. Scott, we are coming up on about an hour, and this is a fascinating discussion, and there's so many rabbit holes, if you will, that we could go down. And I really appreciate everything we're talking about. I don't know if you know this, but I was an adjunct professor with American Military University for 3 years. And so I did that for 3 years, and that was a long time ago. And but we talked about me coming to speak, for some of your programming, and I'm happy to do that anytime. But can I call myself adjunct emeritus?
Well, I don't know. In higher education, there are a lot of steps you have to go through in order to satisfy the criteria on those things. But I'm glad you're sharing your expertise with our students by doing that.
Yeah. So just kind of having some fun there.
Yeah.
But what haven't I asked you? What do you want to share with the listeners that?
You have politicians coming on. The former governor could probably give you a 3-hour session. A college president can do the same thing. I do think the future of our country is in having a well-educated workforce, and we're really fortunate in Virginia. So I have been president of institutions in 4 different states. But the best state for education is Virginia. And I think because everybody lives here, they often take for granted. Any student in the Commonwealth of Virginia has a menu of options available to them on programs that they want at a cost that they can afford right here in the Commonwealth. And I'm talking not just private institutions like mine, community colleges, state colleges and universities, research universities. Those 4 are the hub of higher education in this country. And within a reasonable driving distance of any resident in this state, they can find a school that has a major that they want for a price that they can pay. Can't claim that in other states. And often we take that for granted here. I'll also add that the Commonwealth of Virginia has made private higher education affordable as well. The difference between us and a state institution, there are some scenarios where we're less expensive than schools in our same market that are state institutions. But the Commonwealth has funded a program called the Virginia Tuition Assistance Grant. Any person who meets the residency requirement in Virginia, anyone who goes full-time to any of the private colleges, can get $5,200 a year towards their full-time enrollment free. It's not a loan, it is a grant. And so if a student is from low economic means, they get that $5,200. If they get a Pell Grant on top of that, which can be over $7,000, that's $12,000 towards a private college education that makes it affordable to anyone. And, so often people look at a private institution and they say the sticker price scares them. But schools like mine have large endowments that fund student financial aid. And when you combine VTAG and Pell, it makes a private college education affordable. So,
wow.
But the Commonwealth of Virginia, I think, has the best system of higher education maybe in the world.
Wow.
Private schools, community colleges, state colleges, and research universities, we have the best, and they're within driving distance to every resident in this state.
Wow, that's a pretty significant statement.
Right.
If you want to go to school in the state of Virginia and you're a resident of the state of Virginia,
it's there for you.
It's there. Mm-hmm. It's there. Wow. So listeners, especially if you're here in Virginia, parents, tell your kids, young college age people who are listening, because that we're going to have a university president on today. Share that information with everybody. Education was a door opener for me, and the Navy had tuition assistance, Navy College, and I just a class here, a class there. All of a sudden, 12 years later, I'm completing a bachelor's degree. And then it's like, okay, now I know what I want to study. So then you go to a graduate program, with a real goal. But same thing. That opportunity was there. I took advantage of it. People in the state of Virginia, the opportunity's there. Mm-hmm. Please take advantage of it. Dr. Scott Miller, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks,
today.
Bob.
It's great.
Enjoyable.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Sounds great.
Thank you for listening to the Elevate Your Leadership podcast. To contact Bob directly or to learn more about how Bob can advance you and your organization through leadership training, team building, executive coaching, and public speaking, visit robertpizzini.com. Robert, Pizzini.com, and connect with him on LinkedIn.